Hey, and welcome to part 4 of our full-stack modern booking system. In this part, we're gonna finish the opening hours. So that means an admin can, say close shop for an entire day. They can also open the shop again. So for example, on New Year's, if you wanted to close the restaurant, an admin could do that. And that is gonna be an authenticated procedure. So only an admin can do that. Also, you can change the opening times of the restaurant, and that will affect when users can actually make a booking. So say you can open from 7 until 12 and different times for Sunday and Saturday. So for each day you can configure when you're opening, when you're closing, and only in those times will the user be able to make a reservation. And that also works on the same day. So say it's 9:01 p.m. today, then you could only make a booking onwards from 9:30 and not at 9 and not at 8, not in the past. That's what we're building today. It's gonna be really cool and it's also gonna look good. I'm not gonna get too heavily into the CSS. It's just copy pasted from Tailwind UI at some points. The entire code is available in the GitHub repo in the description. Check that out to follow along. If you get lost anywhere, just for orientation. And let's get started and build this really cool opening hours aspect of our booking system. Okay, so let's get started. And the first thing that we want to do is get started in the schema.prisma, because we've already got the menu items in here. And now we want to also implement the whole opening times with the opening and closing dates. So let's do that. To get started, we're going to initialize a new model that is called close day. And also, we want a model that is called day. Now, the difference you're going to see here in a second. So day is going to get an ID of string, which is going to be a default collision-resistant UID. It's going to get a name, which is going to be like Monday or Tuesday or whatever. Then a day of week, which is very important for the whole calculations. Because in JavaScript, to find out whether a day is like a Wednesday or Saturday, you get a number that is from 0 to 6. Now, you can also see the get day documentation for JavaScript. So for example, 0 would be for Sunday, 1 for Monday, and so on, all the way to 6 for Saturday. All right, then we want an open and a closing time as strings. So that's gonna be like 0, 9, 30, for example. And then we also want close days, right? These are gonna be the days that the restaurant will be completely closed, that you can also add in the back end of the admin. So they're just gonna get an ID and a date in which the restaurant is gonna be closed. So for example, like New Year's or Christmas, if you wanna close on those days. Okay, we're gonna save that and then let's push that. So yarn prisma db push. Let's push that up into the database. So we can also work with the types, and then yarn prisma generate or npx, feel free to use whatever you want, like that. And then we can go into another file, restart the TypeScript server really quick. So that's gonna generate the whole prisma types so we can work with them on the front end. It's gonna take a second, let's let that load and then get right on. Okay, it's done loading. And what I've noticed is that this page right here is not really optimal, right? We did this in the last video, but I found a way to refactor this in a way better fashion. So let me show you what I did. First off, this whole section right here is gonna be removed. We don't need that. Then we're just gonna have the calendar in here. And also we are going to server-side render this. So we're gonna have some server-side props, because we also want the days, right? The days that we are open to get the opening times. And we also want the close days. So we get them both from Prisma, which we're going to import here in a second. And after we imported those close days, we're going to map over them and format them in ISO format, because that is easier to work with and pass around than actual date types. And lastly, from this get server-side props, we're just going to return them to the main component where we're first going to import Prisma. So we're getting rid of the type arrow here. And then we can get rid of this whole stuff right here, the TRPC, the use effect, and the date. We won't need any of those anymore. And then we're gonna create an interface that we can pass to our page next so that we can receive the days and the close days that we are getting from the get server-side props down here. We are receiving them right here as the arguments so that we can work with them. First off, in the calendar, we're gonna remove the set date and the date. and we are going to replace them with the days and the close days that we're going to pass to the calendar. So whenever this component right here renders, we already have those in the calendar. And that's all we're going to do right here. Now we also want to import this from date events. There we go. And now we are done in the index page, and we can get rid of all the unused stuff up here. That feels really good. Just get rid of all that unused stuff. And that's going to be your index. So essentially a way cleaner code that we're going to implement in the calendar right now. So we're going to go into the components and then calendar. So this is the original calendar that we had from the last video. Now let's implement the updated and better, slightly cleaner, actually way cleaner logic in here. So first off, we're going to get rid of this interface. Then we are going to create a new interface that is called calendar props, this one right here, with the day and the close days that we are passing from right here, right? Then we are gonna replace this type right here and also the stuff we are receiving in the calendar. And as you could see, the arrow right here goes away. And then we are gonna import the router also from NextJS. We're gonna determine if today is closed, which is gonna involve just a couple of lines of code because we want to display the calendar as grayed out when today is closed. For that, we're gonna implement, we're gonna find out what today is. And this is where the get day comes in handy. Now the imports we're going to worry about in a second here. We're going to round this to the nearest interval. So you can only, like if it's 9:01 p.m. for example, then you could order from 9:30 starting there. That's why we are rounding. Then we need to know the closing time. And also if it's too late to order, right? That's also very important. And then we are gonna push that into the array if it's too late already, right? So if it's 9:30, but the restaurant was only open until 9, for example, then yes, today is closed, and we want to push that into the close days that we're gonna implement in the calendar component below in a second. Now let's get all the imports done right here. So format ISO, we're gonna import that as well. As you can see, they're all coming from date events. And now let's have the state right here. The state earlier was in this index file right here. We've now moved it back to the calendar where it originally was, because this just makes sense having the state right here. And then we're gonna create a use effect. Now that use effect is gonna run whenever the date time changes. So when the user has actually selected a time, so 9:30 for example, this use effect is gonna run. And if we have the date.time, then we're gonna persist that in local storage. And that's gonna allow us to do something really cool. After we got the time selected, we're gonna push the user to the actual menu. And in the menu, you're gonna see we're gonna do some additional checking that we also have the selected time there. And it just makes the user experience way better because you can also use the back button in your browser. And it's just a way cleaner implementation of this whole thing. Now, the times is not gonna be get times anymore, but it's gonna be a get opening times that we're gonna create as a helper right now. And the calendar is gonna get one more thing, which is the tile disabled. So this is in the end gonna show what the disabled tile will look like, what I showed you in the beginning, right? The grayed out calendar type of stuff. And that's pretty much it. That's the whole refactored calendar. And now let's worry about some of this stuff, right? Where's the interval coming from? Where's the get opening times coming from? This is where the helpers are gonna come in. Now, let's create the helpers. First one is gonna be the weekday index to the name. So if it's like a 6, that's gonna be a Saturday. And to do that, we're gonna create an array of all the days that we have from Sunday through Saturday, and then just return the days at the index. That's pretty much it. Then we're gonna have a little helper function that's gonna join some classes together. That's just for Tailwind UI, so we'll have an easier time working with that. And then let's get into the cool stuff. So first one is gonna be a function to round a given date up to the nearest half hour. Why are we doing this? Well, if it's 9:01 p.m., then someone shouldn't be able to order at 9 p.m., right? They should only be able to order from 9:30 onwards, or 9:20, 9:40, like whatever we set the interval to in the config right here. Remember, whatever this interval is set to, we'll round up to that. This function is going to receive a date and an interval. And then we are going to calculate how many minutes are left until the next interval. So if it's 9:01 p.m., that's going to be 29 minutes, and we're going to add them to the date that we passed in and return that. So we're rounding up to the nearest interval, pretty much. Next one is going to be really interesting. So this one is going to receive two params, and it's going to get us the opening times for a specific day. So we're going to pass in the start date that we want. So for example, like today, January the 20-something, 2022 or 2023, or whatever it is today. It's not even there yet, but whatever the day the user selected is, and then the database days that we have. Now, to get the day of the week, we're going to get the actual day. So that's going to return an integer from 0 to 6. And then we're going to check, is that today? And if it is today, then, well, not if it is today, but then we're going to get today. And if the whole thing is, like if this fails, right? Essentially that means the day that we try to get from the database doesn't exist. And that is a problem because we need all days to exist. So we're going to throw this error right here to let, in our case, us know that we forgot to add the days to the database that we're going to do in a second. Okay, and now let's get the opening time. The closing time, we're parsing those from the stuff we get in the database. So for this specific day, we're going to parse the hours. So 0, 9, 30, for example, into a date, starting with the date that the user selected. And then we're going to do some logic because there is a specific edge case that we need some space for where it is today. So just think of this, right? It's 7:45 p.m. today. That means the user should not be able to order at 7 today, right? And that's the logic we're implementing right here. So if it is today, then you cannot order before the time it is right now. So that's why we created the function up here, the round to nearest minutes. We're going to use that right here. And if there are no more bookings for today, then we're going to throw an error because we won't get to this point, because then in this case, if today has no free booking, then the calendar will gray out the section and the user won't even be able to click on it. So you should never get to the error point in the first place. So let's round up the now, which we're going to create in the config. So export const now is going to be equal to just a new date. And then here you could pass something like, you know, a January 21st, 2023 at 09:01:00. Just to mock the behavior of a new date so you can test your components. But we're going to leave this as a new date. So that means right now. So we can work with that now. And then we are rounding to this interval right here. And if it's too late, then, you know, we can check if it's too late with the function we get from dateFNs. And if it is, we're going to throw the error I just mentioned. We're going to log that out. I forgot to take that out. And then we're going to check, is it before the opening times? And if it is, then everything is fine. We're just going to get the regular opening time from the database, right? So if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, then, you know, the user should be able to just order, for example, from 8 o'clock. However, if it's after the opening, so say 9:01 p.m., then we're using the rounded value that is rounded up. So we used a math.ceiling up here. No, we didn't. That was in the previous one. Never mind. But it's always rounding up. So 9:30 would be the earliest time you could order when it's 9:01 p.m. right now. Okay, now the minutes is going to be the rounded minutes, which is just going to be 0 if it's not rounded. So that's really convenient. And if it's not today, then we don't really need to worry about anything. We can just initialize the hours as the opening hours and the minutes as the opening minutes. So whenever we open according to the database and no specific logic is involved. And that's pretty much it. So let's say we need to map over the times, right? So we need a beginning point for that. And we also need an end point. So say we want to open from 9 p.m. to 12 p.m., then the interval is going to be 30 minutes. So the user should be able to order at 9, at 9:30, at 10, at 10:30, and so on. That's why we're doing this. So we're defining all the values we need, and then we are looping over them in a for loop So we're looping over every value pretty much. So 9, 9:30, 10:30, whatever, pushing that into the array, and then returning that back to this calendar component right here. So we can then display that to the user. And that's all the logic done for the helpers. That's it. Now the interval, we probably, oh, I just named it interval right here. That's why it doesn't work. Let's say opening hours interval. There we go. Let's import that right here in the helpers. There we go. We can import now, also from the constants. And then why is this throwing an error? Day of week does not exist on type day. And that is because the day right here should be coming from our Prisma, so from our database, and not whatever the hell it was previously. There we go. We fixed all the errors, and now we can import the get opening times right here in the index, and also the days. We probably need to import this type from Prisma as well. We can clear all the unused imports, by the way, with Shift, Alt, and O. Get rid of all of those we don't need. Now we can import the opening hours interval. We can import now from the constants. And for some reason, this is still not working. Type 30 has no properties in common with type nearest to number. Okay, so we probably also need to import this from the helpers, because right now it's trying to get that from dateFNs, which is not what we want. Instead, we want this from our helpers right here. And that's gonna work just fine. Now there's a small error right here. Let's see, probably because we also need to import the type right here. And that's getting rid of all the errors. Great. Now we're done with the config, and let's create something cool in our TypeScript config. So let's go into the TS config that we're gonna work with. That's gonna make our life way easier. We're gonna create something called add components, and that's gonna map to source/components and then /anything. And essentially what this is gonna allow us to do, you're gonna see that in a second, we can, instead of going something like, oh, that's not the file we want to work in yet, instead of going like dot server db client and that, instead of doing that, if this were the components, we could just say add components, and it would know that add components means this right here, source components right here. So this is not relative anymore. This is kind of an absolute path, right? So we don't need to go dot and then see where the components are from everywhere where we want to use it. But instead we can just say add components. So that's really convenient. Now let's create a new file called menu.tsx, and let's go into that. We're gonna create that, if you haven't done that yet, in the pages. And then right here, we're going to create a menu.tsx. This is what I mentioned earlier, that we're going to push to whenever the date and time was selected in the calendar component right here. Remember, we are pushing to /menu whenever we have a date and time. And that's what we're going to create right now. So let's jump into that menu file that we just created right here. I've just prepared all the imports, and we probably want to save the tsconfig, restart a TypeScript server. So this is what I just mentioned. We can import from add components, just making things way easier. And now we can get started in the menu.tsx. So what are we going to do in this file? We're going to import or export our component first, and then we're going to create an interface. And now this interface is not going to contain anything. It's just so if we were to add something later, we would have it. This is going to be our component, the menu. Okay, now we want to import the router first, then the state, right? When somebody selected a time, we want to know that. We want to work with that, right? So this is going to be either a string or it's going to be null by default, and we're going to initialize it as null. And this is going to be the time as an ISO string. Okay, then we want some TRPC goodness. We want to do the logic fetch, right? The logic check. And for that, we're going to import the query that we're going to create in a second, or that we've already created in the last video. Hold up, we've already created this, which is essentially mocking the logic check for the menu, right? If everything is valid, we're going to do a backend check on that. This is going to be undefined by default. And if there's an error, I didn't handle it in this project, but this would be a recommendation for you. This is just a small detail that we don't really need to worry about, but this is the validity check of time and date that the user selected. And if this failed, you would probably want to handle it accordingly. So for example, doing that, you could redirect to the home page. Okay, now let's have a use effect where we're getting the item from local storage. Because remember, when we go back to, where was it? Right here, we set the selected time and persisted that in the local storage. So that's where we're gonna receive it from right now, menu.tsx, there we go. This is where we're gonna get it from, and we're gonna do that inside of a use effect, so we're sure that the local storage exists. So everything's already rendered, that means we can access local storage. And if it doesn't, we're gonna push to the home page. So whenever we show the menu, we have to know the date and time that the order would deliver on. And if we don't have that information in local storage, we're gonna push back to the home page. Else, so if there is a date and time, everything is fine. We're gonna parse that as an ISO value. And the thing is, the user can select that, right? But then not order and leave the page. And then when he comes back tomorrow or she, the date is gonna be yesterday, what's in local storage, right? And that doesn't make sense. So it has to be a date in the future that is selected. And if it's not, then we're also gonna push to the home page. Otherwise, the date is valid. And we're just gonna set that as the state we've created up here. Okay, let's work on the JSX. We're gonna have some conditional logic right here with two outcomes. First one is gonna be a button that allows the user to go back. And then we're gonna have the menu component that we've already created. In the other case, if we have failed the logic check, or if there's no, like if this condition right here is false, then we're gonna show the spinner, right? This is gonna be the loading state for our application while the logic check is being done. This one right here, the one in the query that we've done up here. While that logic check is done, we want to show the spinner, and that's pretty much it. Yep, that's everything in this file. Now the menu we're gonna worry about in a second, that this is throwing an error, and we're also gonna create the query, and that is what we're gonna do next actually. So let's jump into a new file that we're gonna create that's not been in a previous project. That is gonna be opening.ts. That's gonna be a backend file, a router that's gonna be in the file system. Let me show you, located right here under router and then opening. So this is a backend route, and let's implement the logic. So first off, we're gonna export a router, that is the opening router. And first thing we're gonna do is a method for changing the opening hours for one specific day, right? Or for multiple in the case, well, if it's not optimized, then we're gonna implement this for multiple days. We only want admins to be able to do this because, you know, changing the opening times of a restaurant should be a protected procedure. And then as an input, we're gonna expect an array of objects, and each containing an ID, a name, an open time, and a close time. So this is gonna be like, you know, the Monday that is open from 9 until 13 o'clock, for example. That's gonna be the input we're expecting. And then let's work on the mutation. So the actual logic behind this API endpoint. First off, we're gonna initialize a promise.all. And because we're expecting an array that we want, and for each array item, we want to make a change to the database, right? In Prisma, there is no easy way to do that with different data for all entries. So for each one, we're gonna create a promise and handle those at the same time. So they're not blocking each other. That's really efficient. And in doing that, we want to update each day where the ID is the day.id that we're gonna pass. And with the data of the close time and the opening time that we're gonna change, the rest can stay exactly the same. And then at the end of this mutation, we're just gonna return these results, which is gonna be a day array. And if you remember, if we go into the schema.prisma, a day array contains these values right here. So whether it's Monday, Tuesday, whatever, and then for each day, from when until when are we open. Okay. Now let's create another mutation for closing a day, right? So an admin should have the chance to say, okay, on New Year's, we're not open, we're closed the entire day. And that's what we're working on right now. So no appointments can be made on that day. And essentially we just expect a date, which is a z.date, really convenient that we can expect that. And the logic is going to be very simple. We're going to create a close day at the date that we passed in the input. Same goes for opening again. So you need to be able to undo the close days that you have, right? Otherwise, if you accidentally close the day, you would always, you couldn't change it. That would just be really inconvenient. So same thing right here, same logic as the close day, but we're just gonna delete the close day so that on the front end, we can map over the closed days and show the grayed out field for each day that is closed. And lastly, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We want all closed days, right? So this is gonna return an array of dates in ISO format. So for example, if the 18th of January was closed, this would be the example ISO. To do that, that's gonna be an admin procedure, just a query, not a mutation. And we are essentially just fetching all the closed days from our database and then returning those in ISO format, so mapping over everyone and converting them to ISO. All right, and that's everything for this file. We've done that, great. And now we can work with that on the front end. First, before we do that though, we need to go into a router and also implement this. So hook up the route we've just built to the app router so that we can interact with it on our front end. And after doing that, we can create a new file that is going to be called opening.tsx. And the file tree that's going to be located under dashboard. And this is for the admin, right? So the admin can actually, change the dates on the backend. This is going to be the admin interface stuff. Now a couple of these are throwing an error. We're going to fix all of them here in a second. First off, let's get building the component. Exporting it, and we want some server-side props. So we're going to server-side render this component, which is in NextJS 13 by default, by the way. But we are using the pages directory, so that doesn't apply. So we're going to use the default get server-side props, as we know from NextJS 12. And we're going to find all the days. So that's going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so on. And also containing when we're open. And if it's not 7 days in length, that means we haven't implemented every day in our database, and we can't have that because we need to assume that we have all of them. So we're going to throw an error in that case. And otherwise, we're going to return the days as props to our component. Now that component doesn't exist yet, so we're going to create it with an interface of days. That is going to be the day array that we get from Prisma. And then we're going to receive those days in the component, set some state, whether the one or the other tab is open. So whether we want to set the opening times or the opening days, you'll see what I mean in a second. It's going to be false by default. So this is just going to be a toggle switch pretty much on the front end. And then also the selected date that we're going to initialize as null. Okay, now the opening hours are getting a bit obnoxious. I didn't really think about it in the first place, but this was the solution I came up with. It works just fine, but I'm sure there will be better solutions to handle this. I just shoehorned all the days in there, and that's my opening hours state. Okay, now let's get into the TRPC stuff. First one is going to be saving the opening hours. So this is going to call the route right here, change opening hours. We need to pass the array of objects, and then we are, remember, with the promise.all, updating all of those simultaneously. So that's going to be really efficient. And on success, we're going to create a toast message that everything worked. And on error, same thing, we're going to create a message that something didn't work, just for better user experience. Now with a close day, that's also going to be a mutation. So when the admin wants to close for New Year's, for example, that's going to happen right here. And then the open day is going to be exactly the opposite, and we're going to refetch. Now that refetch is going to come from down here. And that's going to be the query, right? We want to get all the closed days, and then whenever we change them, we want to revalidate the information so the updated UI gets shown to the admin. And then let's do this. And so essentially we're finding out is the day closed or not. So we have the array of closed days, remember, and then we're checking if the date that the user selected is in there. That's all we're doing. And then let's get into the JSX stuff. That's going to be the cool stuff. So let's initialize the toaster so we can actually show the toast messages. And then, yeah, the JSX stuff is kind of hard to explain. Some of this comes from Tailwind UI. So this is the switch I was talking about earlier, where we have the enabled state from up here, 4, that we have the enabled state 4. That's going to be for this switch that we're going to use to control which tab is shown to the admin. You're going to see all that in the working demo at the end. Some class names that we want to have, but CSS is not the point of this tutorial. Some screen reader friendly stuff, and some more class names that we are going to have in here. Essentially, you're going to find all this in the GitHub repo. No point really worrying about this. This is not something important to understand. This is just CSS. Now the logic in here, if the tab is not enabled, then we want to show one tab, right? And that's going to be the opening time options. That's going to allow the admin to set the opening times for Monday, Tuesday, and so on. And then in the other tab, they could close down days and then save those. First one is going to be the whole opening times, some CSS, and then we're going to map over the days that we are receiving up here. Now for each day, there is a bit of logic involved, right? So we're going to initialize a function called change time right here. We're just going to take the time as a string, the type, either open or close time. Then why are we doing this? Well, you'll see in a second. The index is going to be, that's why we have the weekday index to name. So we want to find out the name of this weekday essentially, and then compare that to get the index of this weekday. This is going to be the function we use to update or state, right? So this big structure up here will be updated through this function that we can then call for each day. So wait, I'm just thinking maybe this is not the optimal way to handle that. I'm gonna think about that later. Maybe we should move this up actually, because this is inside of the map. I'm not sure if there's a huge point to that. I'll see in a second. Hey, so this is me editing the video, and it does actually make sense to move this function over. So in this document right here, I can zoom in a bit. I've highlighted all the changes that we're doing. It's not a lot. It's just this one line right here below days.map, where essentially we are calling a curried function. So we don't have to initialize the same function every time in our map. Then up here, you can see that function we are calling from the map, which is the change time. So this is a curried function, meaning we have a function right here that returns another function inside, which allows us to actually always initialize this with the respective day that we are entering right here as the argument, and then resume with the normal function that you also saw in the video. As always, this just makes it a bit easier, the code a bit cleaner, and I think it's a better approach than the one I've showed in the video. But let's get on with the JSX. So this is going to be a grid with 3 columns with the, and this is going to look really good in the admin dashboard, by the way, with the actual name of the day that we're talking about. And then we're going to have a time selector. This is going to be the open time, but same will go for close time in a second. And the selected time will be an index that we're finding, which is the weekday index to name. So we want to find that inside of all our days. So say the name was Monday right here, then we are looking in our opening.tsx for that exact name and then the opening time. That's how we get the opening time for this day that we are mapping over. And then you'll see the same thing that we have up here also goes for the close time. Same logic with the find index. We're looking through everything and then finding the day that we are currently mapping through. All right, and that's all the logic. Now the time selector we're going to create together here in a minute. And then let's have a saving button that we can use. Now this saving button should call the mutation we have up here, right? We want to save the opening hours. And that's exactly what this button is for. So for every opening hour, we're going to map through it and then also attach the ID of it like that, so that we can then save them to our backend, because we need to update them at the ID. That's how we access them in the database. And then this button has a loading state, is a green scheme. So we're getting it from Chakra UI. That's why it's taking these values. It's a solid button that says save. And in the other case, right, this is a enabled switch kind of. So if the switch is enabled, we want to show the other tab, which is going to be the opening days, where you can actually, close entire days down. This is going to be this section that we want to show. It's going to be toggled off and on at the top of the page. This is going to show the calendar with a minimum date of now. The user shouldn't be able to close dates in the past. Makes no sense. With a class name, a default view, and then we get an onClickDay function that returns us the date the user clicked on. We're going to save that in the state. And also a tile class name. So that's really convenient, because in here we can say, we can have a switch statement, kind of. So a ternary operator. When the close days include this date right here, then it should be grayed out, right? The user shouldn't be able to click it. That's how we do this logic check. So for all the closed days that we get from the database, if this day, right now this runs for every day, if this day is closed, then this CSS class name is going to be attached to it, and otherwise nothing is going to happen. And then we're going to have a button to save that. It's going to be kind of the same button as above, with an on click of the opening day, right? So if the day is already closed, then we want to open it. However, if it's not closed, then we want to close it. So this is also kind of a either or, just not as a ternary operator. In this instance, it takes a disabled state and is loading a color scheme and a variant. And then what is this button going to say? Well, if the day is closed, then we want to revert that. So we're going to say open shop this day for the admin to toggle that. And if the day is open, just a normal day, and the admin wants to close it, then it's going to say close shop this day. And that's everything for this file. Now we still got a few errors up here. So we probably need to install yarn add react hot toast. And we also might need to add the types for that. Now this path seems to be wrong. Let's worry about that in a second. Okay, no, we didn't need to install the types for that. We also want to add headless UI/React. That's the library, the UI library we are building the switch with. Makes it really convenient to build stuff. And then, okay, we also need the Chakra. Now that installation is a bit more difficult. So let's go into Firefox and then see how we're going to install Chakra. Chakra UI NextJS. Let's get Chakra installed. So this is the command we need to run for Chakra. It's not just one command, it's a bunch of them. So let's go back in here. Oh, and actually we want the yarn version. There we go. Get rid of that. Yarn add those. Okay, that's going to take some time to load. Now the time selector doesn't exist yet. We're going to build that here in a second. So I know what that looks like. And then this path seems to be wrong. Let's see. Where are the helpers? They are right. Let's see. Let's go into the helpers. They are under utils. So source, utils, helpers. So where are we? Let's go back one more. And then utils and helpers. And that should fix the error. Yes, it did. Very nice. Now the headless UI, let's just restart the TypeScript server for a second. Because we did install a lot of packages. And that might just fix one or two of those errors. Hopefully. So let's wait for that to load. And okay, so this error is still here. So it doesn't, it seems like it hasn't installed correctly. So let's add that again, headless UI slash React. That should add that to our package, to our project. Says it's successful. There we go. And the error is gone. Perfect. Now the last error we have in this whole file is the time selector. And coincidentally, that's the last thing we're going to do. So let's create a file that is called time selector under our components, because it will just be a reusable component. Now the reason I've got this function in here, because I forgot to delete it before preparing this file for the video, and just don't worry about that, because we have that, as you might remember, as a helper function right here, just for headless UI. Alright, seems like my camera was off there for a second. I've got a DSLR, so I gotta click record every 20 minutes. It's really annoying, and I forgot that, but now it's back. Okay, so where were we? This is a helper, so we don't need that in the time selector, so I just left it in there, but we're gonna delete it in a second. Now let's get started. So let's export our component. Let's create an interface for this component. This is gonna take a couple of options. The change time, which is gonna be a function that has a type of either open or close time, because that's what we used in the opening.tsx. Remember, we want to use the same component just as a opening time component here, and there's a closing time component there. So that's why this function is in there. Then the selected and the type just specified for this time selector that we're rendering. Okay, now let's have some time options. And for every option, like, we're gonna have a for loop, and inside of that we're gonna have another for loop. It's kind of complicated, but essentially we are creating all the options that we have in this time selector. It's gonna be, I didn't start up the project. I got an idea. Let me start the project, yarn dev, the actual finished project. And then let me show you what I should have done this all along. Then let me show you exactly what we are building right now. So that's gonna start up, that's gonna take some time, and we are in the time selector. So if we go to the dashboard, log in with our data, don't save, and go into the opening hours, this is what we're building right now, this time selector, and these are the time options in here, that we have the big ass for loop right here. So that's what we're doing. We're creating each one of these options for this one time selector. That's what we're doing. And now let's have the component that, okay, I don't know, no, that should be up there actually. That's a bad comment, but we are ensuring that the format is always this one right here, the 0 in front. And we're doing this by doing a pad start on the selected time. And then we are returning some JSX. Now the JSX in this time selector, I didn't build this myself, is also done with a UI library that is, you know, where are we getting this list box from headless UI also. It's going to take a value and an on-change handler. So whenever we click a different one, we want some logic to happen. Now, first off, we want to remove the formatting. If this is an open time, right? So if this is like 0630, then we want to remove the 0 to save that in the database, because in the database we won't have the 0 in front. And then we are calling a TRPC endpoint with a change time. Now some, you know, stuff we get from the UI library, we don't really need to worry about that. Some CSS, essentially, this is gonna either say opening or closing time. This is what you can see up here, opening time or closing time. That's the logic for that. And then some more JSX with a bunch of stuff that we really don't need to get into. We're just doing these parts right here with a green dot, and then whichever is the selected is gonna be, you know, has a green dot. Some more CSS that I would have just copy pasted in anyways. Probably I would never code this out. It's not the point of this video. But now we are mapping through the time options. So every single one right here. And then we are returning a list box option. So each one of them is an option that has the value of this specific time we're mapping over. So 5, 5:30, 6 o'clock. And that's gonna give us a bunch of methods which we won't even really use. Essentially, we're just displaying the time. And then originally these green dots are meant as online or offline. That's not what we're using them for. We're kind of abusing them for our purposes. And if we have a selected option, then the text should be a different color. That's all we're saying. So there's going to be a little check box, like the check mark right there in a different color, the indigo one. As you can see here, the high check, and that's all we're doing. Okay, and that is all for this file. So we've got the entire time selector done. That is great. Now the check menu status use query does not seem to exist yet. That is still complaining, but the whole time selector, so this part right here of the build is done. And that is really, really good. Okay, now the last step, I think, is just adjusting some global CSS files. Not files, like global CSS options. So we're going to have the close date in the calendar marked as, let me show you what we're going to do actually. Let's go to localhost 3000. Now these are going to be closed days, right? The 17th, for example, is a closed day, so it's grayed out. And that's what we're doing right here for the admin dashboard. So if the admin is closing shop for a day, that's going to be red with a text of white. And same goes for hover. We're going to use some CSS hacks here with important, because there are some conflicting CSS properties with the original calendar.css in here. So that's why we're using important. And also if it's enabled in focus, we're going to change the color a bit. And that's going to be our whole CSS file. Now, okay, so the menu has a selected time, and that is complaining. So let's take a look at that. The menu.tsx takes, okay, so it doesn't even take anything. That's probably the error. Let's see. Yeah, this will take a selected time, and this selected time is going to be a string, because this is going to be as ISO string. That's going to get rid of the error. Great. Now there are still two more. That's going to be the use query. No, just one more. That's going to be the use query right here. And let's see what this says. Oh, did we have this as a mutation? Check menu status. Yeah, that should be a query. So let's get into our menu router right here. And this should be a query. Like that. Okay. Now we've changed that to a query. And let's save all of these. I've just saved all files, and let's stop the other server and start up this server, yarn dev, and let's see what happens and if there are any other errors. So let's go to localhost 3000, reload that page. Cannot read properties of undefined reading closing time. And that is probably because, let's look into the database. We might not have the actually, let's use yarn Prisma Studio. Let's look into the database and see if we have everything we need. And the reason that error occurred is because no, we do not have everything we need for the days. So let me show you what the database should look like. npx Prisma Studio or yarn Prisma Studio, whatever you want. And I'm not sure if it will recognize, yeah, it recognizes the conflicting ports. This is what the day should look like. So we've got Sunday through Monday with the opening times, with their respective opening times. And this is what we need to get into this database right here. So I'm probably going to do this in like a little time lapse, just transferring them over. I did this manually. It's just 7 days. It's not too bad. You don't really need a seed for this, although you could go that way. So I'm just going to transfer these over and then be right back. All right, and that is the last day. That's Saturday. We're going to save those changes. I don't want to do that again, although that literally took like, 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, and now with that data in our database, we can get rid of that and restart our server, yarn dev. Let's restart the dev server. It's going to be on localhost 3000, and let's see what happens. Hopefully no error, so let's restart the page. By the way, in the original CSS, I've gotten rid of the disabling the whole weekend thing. So if you go into the calendar.css in the real project, this is commented out. So I'm gonna have that in the GitHub code as well. So if you want to enable weekends, which you probably do as a restaurant, then you're gonna go into here, and there is some, let's see, do not show weekends. There it is. We can replace that, save that, and that's gonna also show the weekends. Now this is gonna look kind of weird, so I'm just gonna copy paste over the CSS. CSS is not the point, that's why I think it's fine. It's gonna make the calendar look a bit better, and that's it. That's all the logic done, I think. So whenever we click, let's go back, localhost 3000. Whenever we click the 16th, say, right, that's a Monday, let's open up the database next to this. So booking is the project I've used for my development. Let's go into the database. That's still up, great. However, let's open that on Firefox, localhost 5555. That's gonna be our database. And let's say Monday the 16th, right? That's gonna be open at 7:30. So let's click on that. And that's 7:30 when it's starting, and all the way through 13 o'clock, which is when we close. And then there should probably be a back button for UX purposes. I didn't really bother. The Tuesday, the 17th, starts at 5, starts really early. But that's because it's in a database like this, and then until 12:30, oh, that seems to be a bug still. I'm gonna fix that. But it starts at the right time. Hey, this is me editing Josh again, and the error was very simple to fix. It's in this line of code right here. If you want, you can pause and try to find it, but I'm just gonna show you what it is. So we are adding the hours, but we are not adding the minutes, which is the entire problem. So in this object, we can also pass the minutes, and those minutes are gonna be the get minutes of closing. So we have the get hours and get minutes. And if we save that and take a look at what that looks like in the Tuesday, where we close at 12:30, we can see, okay, the minutes are in here and everything is working just fine with this very simple line of code that we fixed. Let's see, like Wednesday, 12 till 13 o'clock. That works just, why doesn't Tuesday work? That's weird. That's really weird. Okay, but let's go into the dashboard and actually mess with the opening times a bit. So let's log in. Oh, and that's going to be admin@email.com, and then admin. Like that, we're going to sign in, go to the opening hours, and that's going to allow us, if everything worked, which I hope it did. Let's go here. Yes, it did. We've got this CSS doesn't seem to be working though. Why is that? Probably because we also need to insert the chakra provider into our app, which we need to do for the styling to work. So this comes from chakra UI. We can take this one, paste it after there. This one comes from chakra UI/React, and that should fix the little styling issue. Let's save that and reload the page. Yes, there it is. There's our saving button. That works fine. Let's change the Sunday opening time from 6 to 5:30. Save that. Opening hours have been saved. Let's restart our database right here. And then Sunday should be 5:30. Yes, it is. That worked correctly. Then if we go to localhost 3000 and want to book on a Sunday, that's going to start at 5:30 because that's what we set it in the backend. If you wanted to go, let's say Sunday, we want to open at, let's go 9 o'clock, save that. And then when we go back to localhost 3000 as a user, want to book on a Sunday, first one is going to be 9 and the latest one is going to be 12 because that's when we close on a Sunday. Okay, now I think the half hour we have on Tuesday really confuses our system. So let's try let's try it on the Sunday from 12 to 12:30. Let's just save that, and then that should not work, right? Localhost 3000. Go on Sunday 12. Yeah, okay. So the ending times doesn't work. I think that is a very simple fix. I didn't realize that when I made this video, but I'm gonna do that in the GitHub code with a comment. So that's gonna be fixed when you visit the GitHub link in the description. Now let's visit the other thing. So as an admin, you can also disable days, right? So the opening days. Let's say on the 16th, we want to close shop this day. Okay, now the UI should probably be a bit, okay, the UI doesn't work really well, but as you can see, the thing is red, at least when it's selected. Now that should be a potential fix in the CSS, although I don't really like CSS, but you can see the option is open shop the same. So the 16th should be closed now. And to check that, we're gonna go to the front end. And as you can see, the 16th is in fact closed by the admin. And let's also close the 17th. As you can see, it's available. However, if we want to close on that day for whatever reason, the 17th right here, we can click close shop this day. Now that looks really weird in CSS, but that's a very simple CSS fix. So I'm not gonna bother. As you can see, the 17th is also closed just fine. And because today, like it's 9:12 p.m. right now, and the opening times for Sunday, where I'm filming this, are until 12. So the day is grayed out. That's really cool. So I cannot order today in the past because that makes no sense. And we also implemented the logic for that. But we can order any day in the future that we want that is not closed by the admin. Great. I'm going to implement a little fix for the time in the GitHub with a comment so you know exactly where the issue was. But that is the logic for our opening times done. How cool is that? Regardless of the little CSS bug that we have in the admin dashboard, everything is working exactly as it should. I'm really happy with this result. So everything works now, from the opening times to the loading to the actual menu. We can go back to the time selection. We've implemented that today. We can filter. This is getting somewhere. This is a really cool booking system. I really enjoy this. One more step would be to implement the payment. We're going to do that with Stripe. So everyone can pay by card. It's going to be really cool. Maybe PayPal in the future. Implementing PayPal is not that difficult. I've done it in the past. It's just, you know, kind of weird. I guess I might do a video on PayPal in the future. But this is it. I'm really happy with this. That's all I want to show you. Link to the GitHub is going to be in the description, of course, if you got lost anywhere. And let me know how you enjoyed this whole concept with me not actually coding this out, but just skipping through with the code bits that we did, like this, with the code bits that I skipped through. Let me know how you like that idea. I'm really curious. And that's all. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one, and bye bye.